evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this evening Development Management Committee meeting. I'm Captain Tony McCarthy, and I shall be chairing the meeting this evening. Joining with me around the table are ward councillors, senior officer from the council's planning department, a senior officer from the highways department. We also have the head of the legal department, and we're also joined by one of our executive directors. So that you know we all are, I should begin by asking everybody to introduce themselves to you. Judith, would you like to begin, please?
Good evening, I'm Judith Wheeler, Councillor for Appleton, which doesn't include Appleton Thorn, Hatton, Streatham and Higher Warrington.
Yes, I'm Peter Walker, I'm substituting for the Council for Borough. I'm the Councillor for Stockton Heath.
Good evening, Councillor David Keane, representing Penketh and Kierley.
Good evening, Councillor Graham Friend, representing Portman North.
Councillor Les Morgan, representing Latford West, substituting for Councillor Peter Carey.
Councillor Brian Matt, Poplarton U.
Councillor Steve Wright, PC Whitecross.
Councillor Jean Flaherty, Fairfield and Howley.
Joan Graham, Councillor for Culture for Glazebury and Croft.
Jenny Cardwell, Crossing Services.
Matt Cumberbatch, the Council's Head of Legal Services.
Ollie Walker from Planning.
Martha Hughes, Planning.
Mike Taylor, Highways Development Control.
Andy Farrell, Executive Director of the Council.
Stuart Brown from the Property Team. Thank you, Councillor.
Many thanks, colleagues. To our audience, very welcome. Just to remind you all that this particular session is being filmed by Mr. Buttrey, who's the gentleman at the front there, so he'll be filming us. Okay? There's a lot of people in the room, and I know we've got some of the issues we've got to discuss tonight can get a little bit heavy, so I'd ask you all, please keep quiet while we hear what people have to say. It's important. We want to hear what the objectors have to say. We also want to hear what those in favour of the application seem to say. So you've got dedicated speakers who are going to speak on your behalf. So if you give us the best of attention, hopefully we can reach a conclusion. Many thanks. So, councillors, if you turn to your agenda, please. And we'll take item 1, apologies.
We have apologies from Councillor Barr, Councillor Carey and Councillor Mitchell.
All approved, thank you. Item 2 is our code of conduct. Does anyone wish to declare any pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest in the applications? Peter, did you?
Yes, Chairman, I have to declare an interest in item 2 and item 4.
I take it you will leave it?
I will be leaving the room during the debate on those 2 items.
Thank you, Councillor. Judith?
Thank you, Chair. Item 2, I'm a member of Appleton Parish Council, but I have managed to keep out of all discussions with the Bloor application. Item 4, 40 Bridge Lane, I will be coming off committee and speaking in favour of that application. And items 7 and 8, Walton Hall, Walton Lee, I've had no discussions on those applications. They're in my ward.
I think it's okay to say to those matters. Yeah, okay. Anybody else? Yes.
Just to say that item 6 is in my ward.
Anybody else got any declarations?
Yeah, of course. Of course, item 1 is as well.
Yes. Many thanks. So item 3 is the minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of April 2018. Are those accepted to be in the true record? Thank you. So item 4 now is our planning applications. I'm going to change this around because obviously you can see the room is full of people. So I'm going to take item 2 first, which is land to the east of Stretton Road, north of Pepper Street, in the centre of Appleton Thorn. It's a proposed erection of 74 dwellings, public open space, landscape and associated infrastructure. The committee went to visit this on Friday for the site visit, but we have been in that area several times, certainly over the last 12 months. I have several speakers. I shall take those who wish to speak against the application first. I have a Mr. Alan Murray, Lizzie, if I pronounce your surname, is it McLoone? Pronounce it?
Yes.
Yeah. I have a Liz McLoone and Mr. Kevin McLoone and Councillor Bay. So who would like to go first? You're Liz, are you?
Pardon?
You Liz, yes?
Yes.
Yes. Good evening, Liz. Please. just a reminder to all the speed, I think it's been explained to you, we operate a traffic light system.
Yes.
So you've got 3 minutes, at 2 minutes will change to amber, then you've got 1 minute, and when it's red, I will ask you then to conclude and go back to your seat. But if any of the councillors wish to ask any questions, then I'll invite you back to the table.
Right.
Okay. When you're ready, please. Many thanks.
Do I switch this on?
Yes, fine.
There is a 1765 Enclosure Act for Appleton and Lynn, which covers several areas, and in particular land known as Spen Heath, which prevents the creation of new roads or the removal of hedges, fences, gates, etc. The following are some relevant extracts from the Act, a copy of which is in Warrington Central Library. There are within the manor of Appleton and Lynn diverse parcels of common or waste grounds called Hillcliffe Common, School Common, etc., Spen Heath and other small parcels in Appleton, Broom Edge, Heathley Heath, Little Heathley, Statham Lodge, etc., and other small parcels in Lynn. It is enacted that the said commissioners shall and may, and they are thereby directed and required to set out and appoint such public and private roads and ways, and also such ditches, mounds, fences, drains, watercourses, banks, bridges, gates and stiles, in, over and upon the said several or common waste grounds. That such public roads shall at all times forever thereafter be repaired and kept in repair, and that after such public and private ways or roads shall be made, as I quote, it shall not be lawful for any person or persons to use any other roads or ways, either public or private, in, over, through or upon the said common waste grounds intended to be enclosed. A local resident has visited the Cheshire County Records Office and confirmed from a map of the enclosed area that the Appleton and Lynn Enclosure Act indeed covers the village central field. Therefore, as the Enclosure Act does apply to Spen Heath, and as the proposed Bloor Homes development is targeted for land formerly known as Spen Heath Common, then there would seem to be a strong case that the Act would be infringed by this development. We are advised that the Enclosure Act is an Act of Parliament and is still legally valid and cannot be overturned by a mere regulation or order. Importantly, it seems it can only be repealed by another Act of Parliament. Importantly, there are recent legal precedents, Flamborough 1997, Solihull 1998, where local enclosure acts prevented developments. In conclusion, CARE urges the Council to refuse this Bloor Homes planning application pending carrying out a legal assessment regarding any infringement of this development on the Appleton and Lynn Enclosure Act.
Many thanks, thank you. And again, if you have any questions, we'll invite you back to sit. Many thanks, thank you. Who wishes to go next?
I'll go.
Alan, yes, please. Good evening, Alan. Good evening, please, yes.
In their own words, Bloor Homes state that the proposed development has been designed with the community in mind. We do not agree. We would simply pose the question, if the community were asked to design a village centre...
We have one of the councillors has a hearing. Could you put the microphone?
Sorry.
We're starting time again. I'm sorry. When are you ready?
Okay. In their own words, Bloor Homes state that the proposed development has been designed with the community in mind. We do not agree. We would pose the question, if the community were asked to design a village centre, what would they have in mind? Consultation has been minimal. The Bloor Homes public consultation event was almost 4 years ago. The overwhelming majority of those who attended said the village field was not an appropriate location for such a large housing development. This was villagers not saying no to houses, but saying no to houses on our village field, which has been a green space for hundreds of years, a village common for most of those years. Meetings between Bloor Homes and the NDP group have consisted mostly of their representatives displaying the latest plan. We feel the proposed development is not sustainable. Appleton Thorn village is a small rural community. Its character will be dramatically affected by this development. At the centre of the village, it would increase the size of the village by 15%. It would produce a new isolated community. The application fails to address our lack of retail, educational, recreational and health facilities, increasing the need for more use of motor cars. Our area lacks footpaths. Local public transport is very limited. Villagers rely on cars for all aspects of their lives. The application, which would not facilitate the use of sustainable modes of transport, doesn't acknowledge this or our existing traffic problems. The extra vehicles using the one available access point to the development would greatly exacerbate existing congestion, noise and pollution. The inevitable parking problems have also not been addressed. All these problems will not be mitigated by financial contribution. Arguments that this development will contribute to the local economy show a lack of knowledge of the area. The essence of our neighbourhood development plan is the protection of the character of the village. This development in the centre of the village is adjacent to listed buildings, would erase for all time an historically open green space. It would have a marked effect on the character of the village. The proposed development lacks social, environmental and social sustainability. It conflicts with our neighbourhood plan. It's in the wrong place. We ask this application be refused.
Thank you very much, Alan. Miss Murray, you going next?
No,
Yes. When you're ready, please. Yes.
Good evening, councillors. I'm Kevin McAloon. I'm here to represent the Appleton Thorn Neighbourhood Plan Group. Our neighbourhood plan was designed to ensure that any development met the needs of the local community. Bloor Homes have again claimed that they have continually sought to consult with the local community in establishing their present plans so that, quote Bloor, the proposed new development has been designed with the community in mind and that the views of local people are reflected in the design proposals. This local community does not agree. We have had a number of meetings with the developer, the last effective consultation meeting late 2016 when Bloor Homes representatives agreed to work with a compromise on our site design. They never did, and our design proposals were completely ignored. Therefore, the present submission does not reflect the majority view within the community. At the public consultation in Appleton Thorn Village Hall, Bloor Homes produced this option. Please note the reference to a good provision of public open space along the front of the site at Stretton Road. Compare this now with the proposed layout in tonight's submission, which shows a significant reduction of green space due to the inclusion of more houses. We developed a design based on the first option, which is now indicated on the third. The retention of adequate green space was deemed by the vast majority of residents to be fundamental for the preservation of village character and its valued heritage. Our neighbourhood plan, agreed and accepted by this planning committee only last year as legally binding, emphasised this core necessity. This would give villagers a pleasant walk with seating, a pathway where none exists at present, children's play facilities and an effective recreational area with broad utility, all in a central location, and include, of course, a pedestrian crossing for safety and access from the Village Hall car park. This council has a policy on green infrastructure and open space, which teaches green space should have a genuine recreational value rather than a landscape-only one. Our design meets this criterion and would only require the removal of 4 houses, but Bloor have totally ignored this request and have reduced the frontage onto Stretton Road, limiting the scope for meaningful community use. We believe our design suggestion is reasonable and does not contravene any planning policies. We would ask the committee to please ensure the wishes of the community are not ignored at the expense of seeking maximum profit from a landowner and developer who have no long-term interest in the site. In conclusion, villagers would prefer a no-build outcome on this valued central village field, but maybe could accept an amended plan with only 4 fewer houses. This would give adequate central green space, creating a valued, sustainable amenity for all to enjoy. The NBT team tried hard to reach a satisfactory compromise with the developer, and we would ask you to refuse this application.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Okay. Just let me go through those again, just very briefly, just so we can.
So this was one of the...
Can you use the microphone briefly then? Just so we can, I miss it, so just very briefly again.
This was one of the plans that they used as an incentive
right.
to get us to, and this is what most people put their disc in for.
Okay, thank you.
That was all that is
green
recreation,
space. Okay.
Green space.
Go on to the next one, please.
The next one is, no, it's that one.
Yeah.
This one is the plan that they're submitting now.
Right, yeah.
With houses
We've
here.
got that one, yeah.
Yeah.
And the third one,
Do you want to?
Yeah. And the third one is the Bloor submission minus 4 houses at the front, and it gives us a much broader area of green space right in the centre of the village, so that there's a pathway from down here all the way around into the larger recreational space, and we would have we would have the children's play area opposite the village hall. There's a pedestrian crossing.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Thank you. I
Okay.
just wanted to pay me on that.
That's fine.
Okay. Thank you for that. That's lovely. Thank you. Councillor Bacon.
Good evening, Councillor.
Good evening, Councillor. Fellow Councillors, this is the third time I've had to represent the residents of my ward before this committee in 2 years as Borough Council. On all 3 occasions, I've been speaking on major planning applications, the ramifications of which go beyond the neighbouring properties to the site itself. Like the residents I represent, I understand the need for housing, and I appreciate the need for an objective planning policy framework. But any policy framework can only be judged successful if it is flexible enough to take into account the unique local factors involved in each case. I ask you tonight to consider the village of Appleton Thorn, a village still in the truest sense, self-contained, on the southern border of our borough, with a rich heritage and blessed by an abundance of green space. At its centre for generations has been the village field. In an ideal world, no development would take place. But if development were to take place, it needs to be sensitive to the unique character of the village. Indeed, in some of the original suggestions presented by Bloor, there were options which incorporated a much greater proportion of green space, a lower density of housing, and were much more considerately designed to create public open spaces which would enhance the village rather than threaten its identity and environment. These alternative options were broadly welcomed by many village residents, accepting that if development were to happen, at least the village may gain in some way and retain some of its heritage. Unfortunately, those earlier alternatives have been lost in the post, and for whatever motivating factor, we have been left with a design which loses the vast majority of green space and creates public realm which, for all the suggestions of a village green, is little more than a footpath and a play area along Stretton Road. It is certainly not the green buffer zone envisioned by the Neighbourhood Development Plan, who worked so diligently to produce a vision which safeguarded Appleton Thorn's unique character whilst recognising that some development was inevitable. It is worth noting that Bloor have made some concessions to their earlier application this evening, not least the bungalows which will now border Chapel Lane. Yet whilst these concessions are welcomed, they are concessions to a design which was most unwelcomed and which was met with public outcry. When a village celebrates its heritage, when a village sets about becoming the first community in Warrington to complete a neighbourhood development plan, and when a village sets up a care group to try and engage with Bloor to influence those plans, it seems to me unfair, unreasonable and undemocratic to not give consideration to the unique circumstances of that village when deliberating this planning application tonight. I would also ask that councillors consider the broader context of the Homes England applications which were approved earlier this year. The infrastructure of South Warrington has had enough, and quite frankly, the people and communities of South Warrington have had enough as well. We need to stop hiding behind a policy framework which does nothing to empower residents or indeed this committee in doing the right thing, and I ask you to reject the application this evening so that developers can again look at those promising earlier alternatives and come back with an application which balances the interests of current as well as future residents of Appleton Thorn.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Could I ask Mr. Mark Wait, when you're ready, please, Mark.
Yes, please. Thank you. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to address this committee. My name is Mark Waite. I am the Planning Director for Bloor Homes, and I have been involved in the many iterations of this project. I've spoken at a number of planning committees, as you would expect over the years, and I'm always very nervous. Tonight is no exception, and the reason I'm always nervous is because of the significance of what I do. The significance of what I do for my company, the significance for your authority, and of course the significance for the Appleton Thorn community. Some of the history of this application is outlined within the committee report. You're well aware of the previous refusal back in June 2017. We were aggrieved by that decision. We thought we'd come to a decent scheme back in summer of 2017, but rather than appeal, we took our medicine, if you like. We looked again at our proposals, we started afresh, and the scheme has evolved. In short, I think in June 2017, your officers were right. The scheme before you tonight is a better scheme. We have engaged extensively with the council since then, and with the local community, and with the neighbourhood plan group, and the scheme is what's presented before you. And the scheme before you not only addresses all of the previous reasons for refusal, it also addresses points made by members of committee and also points made by members of the community. We have reduced the overall housing numbers to 74. We have firmed up the proposals for public open space, which members will note from the officer's report is considerably in excess of policy. We've included the provision of 8 bungalows, which was a specific suggestion at the last planning committee. We're providing 22 much needed affordable housing, and we've agreed to make an education contribution of nearly £500,000, as well as other contributions. The site is identified for residential development within the made Appleton Thorn neighbourhood plan. There are no technical reasons that have not been addressed. I think we can all agree that planning isn't easy. I've spent 30 years being a town planner, and the evolution of this scheme has taken some 6 years since we've started being involved, with the first period of public consultation back in June 2014. It's been a long process. But the scheme before you tonight is, in my view, the right scheme for this site. I urge you to support your officers and resolve to improve this application.
Thank you very much indeed. If there are any questions for you again, I'll invite back to the table. Thanks so much. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Steve. Yes, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I think one thing we do need to put to bed first before we go any further is address the item raised by the first speaker, that lady's presentation. And I'd like to ask our legal team, have they checked the Act of Parliament that this lady mentioned? And if so, is it valid?
Thank you, Chair. I think what the committee have to think about first is what you've been asked to do tonight. So just put that to one side for a second. You're being asked to have a look at the planning application and see whether or not it fits in with the appropriate planning regulation and guidance. And that is your role. As to whether or not the land is covered by any separate legislation is a matter which I think it seems could be dealt with by the actual owner of the land, or the person who applies to own the land, and as to whether or not there are any rights or anything recorded on the registration of the land which may prevent development from going ahead. And so I think primarily, my first comment to you would be that I'm not entirely sure that that is something which is maybe being put before you, but as to whether or not something you should actually be considering at this stage. I think also as well what you're being asked to do is take a piece of legislation that's 250 years old, where you haven't particularly seen the plans as to whether it relates specifically to this piece of land, and see whether or not a court would choose to enforce it and whether or not it would be relevant. So I think that's the second point. The main purpose of the Act, as I understand it, is that it was not to prevent development on land, but it was to parcel land for agricultural purposes over 200 years ago. And so it is being put forward in a way which I think is somewhat different to what the original intention of the land was to be at the time. But from my point of view, I think the first point really is that you have to consider in what context you're actually making your decision today, and how you would sort of approach it from the side of the planning information that's being put forward to you, rather than separate legislation which the applicant may have to deal with if they look to develop the land for you to approve it.
Anybody else? Jude,
a couple of questions. Question for highways. What makes a development sustainable? Because the Bloor say that this, and yourselves say that this development is sustainable, but we know that Appleton Thorn is very reliant on cars because we have an hourly bus service which doesn't run on Sunday. Does that make a development sustainable?
I think in this instance we certainly didn't agree with the statements within the transport assessment about the site being fully sustainable and accessible by non-car roads. It is a peripheral location of the site. But that being said, the applicant has agreed to provide funding towards the upgrade of bus services to improve peak time frequency and extend the evening service, and also to fund 2 new bus shelters and upgrade the existing facilities. It's also pointed out that the site itself is in the heart of an existing settlement, so it's not, as itself, an unsustainable location.
Just come back on that, Chair. I mean, it's sustainable in the sense you can walk to a church or the pub. It's not sustainable because there are no shops within walking distance, and possibly not even the school because it's on a very busy road. Concerned with that.
thank you, Councillor. Anybody else wish to? Yes, David?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Two main concerns, really, if you'll allow me. One is sustainability in highways terms. I think Judith's covered some of the areas of that one already. My particular concern is the cumulative effect over time of the several recent developments that have been passed in the area on top of this one, and whether we properly consider those with their cumulative effect. I'd make the comment on the bus route that whilst there may be money for additional bus routes, the current bus routes are never safe in Warrington. We've seen so many cuts over the years. That's partially down to national funding, partly down to local usage. But when we talk about additional service, I would ask our transport experts, can you guarantee the current service that would make this contribution additional? I'd be very doubtful if you could give me a certainty on that answer. So sustainability in terms of highway terms is an issue that obviously members will make their own decisions on as a final arbiter of policy after listening to officers' advice. If I just move on very briefly to the sustainability aspect and the green space, I have noticed that the officer's report says that the developer has provided in excess of the minimum standards of the green space. In fact, it seems to about 5 times as much as the minimum required. Now, looking at the plans presented by the lady just a moment ago, while the space may be there in tiny kind of slithers of verges, they're really not kind of open amenity space for residents, and we can see that really, really clearly from the plan. So I think while you may kind of accumulate lots of small slivers of land and say it's community space, it really isn't usable community space. People don't sit as families and communities on grass verges. It just doesn't happen, putting pavements, etc. You do need real open space. It isn't just concreted or tarmacked for play areas. This was akin to a village green situation. It doesn't seem to be at the moment. So I'd like the questions on obviously the sustainability aspect, the bus aspect, the village green aspect, and does this really honour the democratic right of the local neighbourhood plan, as residents and councillors said that this committee took very seriously, and the council as a whole encouraged last year. Really welcome honest and open advice from our officers so we can make a fair decision. Thank you.
Right, will you take the transport one first, highways, and then we'll come back to you? Okay.
Thanks, Chair. I can't give you any guarantees as regards to bus services, councillor. That's within the heart of Network Warrington's decision in terms of services. What I can say is the issues in relation to the sustainability of the site are mentioned on page 43 in the bottom paragraph of your report, and that this and the other HCA sites that were considered by the committee contributed towards ensuring that bus services can be provided in the future.
Okay, so could this money essentially be used to just preserve the current service that was there if it was lessened by Network Warrington? Could this money be just used as a buffer to maintain the very core irregular service that currently exists? Because that to me, sir, is not sustainable.
Sorry, Chair. I can't give you the exact wording of the 106 agreement, but it will be specifically towards what they indicated that it would be served for. Just bear with me 1 second. It's my understanding that it's towards the upgrade of bus service number 8 to improve peak time frequency, so I'm sure that will be reflected in the 106 agreement.
The planning obligation would be specific about what the money is intended to do, and it would be to improve the service. It would specify the bus service, and it would be to improve the peak time frequency, so we'd have records of what the existing frequency and what we're trying to achieve with the improvement.
So could we have some certainty of that? Because if members are asked to take this as sustainable development, let's have a little bit of certainty before a decision about what that actually means in terms of sustainable highways. And is this for 12 months or is it in perpetuity? Residents will always live there. My kind of experience of this kind of arrangements is that they're actually very short term. That may to be increased patronage to begin with. My fear is that this isn't sustained in the long term, and we are looking for long-term sustainable development when passing applications as elected members.
As well as the contribution towards the servicing irregular or conditions relating to the travel plan. One of those is a residential travel plan that specifically aims to get those residents to use alternative means of transport. So it's a package of measures. One condition is for a travel plan coordinator to be appointed. Another condition is specifically for a residential travel plan aimed at targeted at the proposed occupiers of the new development, plus the obligation in terms of the financial contribution to improve the bus service, the existing bus service, specifically the frequency. So the wording is set out on page 44, and we can confirm to you that can be noted in the minutes that it's that wording that will be adapted into the planning obligation.
Joan,
I particularly wish to ask for clarification about the what the neighbourhood plan says about this field in the middle of the village, because I have a feeling we've had contradictory information. That the last speaker from Bloor Homes said that this field had been identified in the neighbourhood plan as being available for housing. I think that's correct. But I'm sure someone else said that in the neighbourhood plan it was supposed to be a green area, and someone mentioned that up till fairly recently it had been a common, but now was a farmer's field. Can we have some clarification about this status?
Thank you, John.
As far as the planning status of the land is concerned, it's set out in planning course. It's previously agricultural land, farmer's field, fenced off, and it's classed as a greenfield land. The development proposed is on a greenfield site. The page 43 sets out the reference to the Appleton Thorn neighbourhood plan. The site is one of the sites included in the neighbourhood plan and recognised as it's a site likely to come forward for the future residential development, and that's what the plan seeks to try and influence residential development on this site. The developer Bloor Homes for a number of years has had various community engagement events, etc. And one of the iterations of a potential scheme is actually included in the neighbourhood plan, and that's what one of the local residents speaking tonight showed members. That's here, map 4B in the neighbourhood plan. So in terms of the status of the land, it's recognised as potential for future development, and that's what this scheme is here before you tonight. In last year, an application came forward. Members will recall that was refused, not on the principle of development, that was refused for specific reasons about the highway, the design of the layout and highway requirements, as well as provision of affordable homes. The officer recommendation tonight sets out the assessment based on the information in the neighbourhood plan, the core strategy, the MPPF, the requirement for new homes in Warrington, and looking at what the application delivers in terms of sustainability, improvements to bus services, a package of conditions for travel plan, together with the provision of affordable homes, and officers' advices that together with the existing Appleton Thorn neighbourhood plan, this proposal is policy compliant.
Okay, John. Yes, Steve.
Is it me?
Yes.
Without prejudice, one of the comments, there's another option, wasn't there, that the residents had sort of put together, which would be to reduce the number of houses. It's refreshing sometimes to get a little bit of compromise rather than just we're dead against this. And I'm just wondering, is there any mileage in that being looked at as a way forward? I'll look at them tonight.
I appreciate there's an alternative that's been put forward by local residents that would reduce the scheme again by 4 dwellings. Members need to consider what's been submitted, what's before us tonight. Is this acceptable or not? This is the iteration that the applicants put forward. Open space to the north of the site opposite the church, which the applicant contends is central to the existing village. It's this scheme that members are being asked to determine. If members feel that there is a fundamental problem with this scheme, then obviously the applicant would need to consider if they appeal or they go back and look at alternatives such as the proposal put forward by the residents. It's important to note the applicant has mentioned it. The previous scheme for members last year was 178, this is now 174. There does need to be that balance. Members want to see the affordable housing provision. There needs to be some improvements in terms of sustainability of public transport. There are a package of measures, obviously every time there are different iterations, there are potential other knock-on effects as well.
Yes, you do.
Mine was really the same question as Steve's, but I was going to ask Mr. Wade sort of a variation on that question, if possible.
That's come back to the table, please. You'd have to put the question now, please.
You're obviously very aware of the neighbourhood plan, and residents have said that more green space would be more acceptable to them. Now, I appreciate that there is more green space than the council standards allow, but this is a very rural environment, so you would expect that. You would expect more than the policy. So why did you not take the views of the Appleton residents on board to give more green space?
Well, we did take the views. It's disappointing that it's not consensus and support for this application. You appreciate that, although there was support for the application expressed, it's not unanimously opposed. We had many discussions with the neighbourhood plan group, and we have made substantial concessions in terms of the quantum of green space, the quantum of residential units, the inclusion of bungalows. I think what's the starting point for the consideration of this scheme? Well, it's a green field in a, I'm sorry, I am going to use the word sustainable, it's a green field in the centre of a settlement. It's also a site that's been identified for 82 units within the council SLAR. It was also suggested for 80 units within the SLAR. iterations of the neighbourhood plan do talk about the green line. I think there is a green buffer zip, and it's unfortunate. I just want to make two further points on that. It's unfortunate that we can't sort of zoom out and see sort of Google Earth, because what our designers are trying to do is they're trying to create something that sits within the context of the existing settlement. And if one carries on across Arley Road, there clearly are some green strips, and the idea was to sort of beef that up but reflect the local character rather than have what I would be...
I don't really want to drift away from the question that was asked.
But the question was asked about the quantum of open space, and I'm saying one of the reasons what's
the question was
limited...
asked was that presentation by Liz and Kevin, was that regarding, that's why I said again to look at those particular plans, that it was reduced down to 74 with some more open space. Was that acceptable? And that's the question.
I've not seen those plans. I'm sorry, the plans that were shown to you, that plan there.
The plan that
yeah.
It seemed to curry some favour, if that's the right word.
That one.
That's the one.
Yeah. There's that plan. We've not looked at that plan, I've not seen that before, but we have looked at the potential of increasing the quantum of open space adjacent to Arley Road. And as I said, we looked at that within the context of the settlement and felt that the scheme before you reflected more fully the context of the settlement. That's what we've done. Now, the neighbourhood plan group will be able to sort of tell me a little bit of concept of the neighbourhood plan, but one of the suggestions in the neighbourhood plan was the acceptability of an access road through the front, which clearly, I'm not a designer, I'm a policy planner. I think that the most suitable access is here, and I think that the strip that we've got on the front is very much reflective of what is in Appleton, and it actually provides a scheme and a coherence that works as it sits there in front of me, just that, but it also works within the context of the village.
Okay, many thanks. Anybody else? Yes, David, any question for Ms. Wiggin?
If that's okay, then I do intend to be kind. I do know how hard these presentations are, and I do respect that, but obviously the previous development back in 2016 for 78 houses was knocked back by the committee, and that was largely because of manoeuvrability of refuse wagons, etc., etc. So I can see that you've done some moving around of that scheme with a few less houses to kind of make that work a touch more, and I think that's to be appreciated. But for sustainability and kind of acceptance within a community, I know that your company should have that at its real heart. You want the community to take on the development. There were noises tonight of there were some positive aspects with this. I think one representative mentioned 4 less houses would give this kind of great acceptability. Now, I know developers are driven by pound signs. You seem to have a more reasonable community side to you. I suppose I'd just like to push you on that aspect to kind of allow this to fit in the community. And I recognise what our planning officer said earlier on. The planning application is what's on the table. But do you not think it's worthwhile respecting that neighbourhood plan, working very carefully with local residents, and actually coming out with something that's truly accepted and really benefits the whole community?
Thank you, that was very kind input. I do appreciate that. I think we've done that. I appreciate we haven't got where we'd like to be. I sat here in June, or sat next door actually, listened in June when this application was discussed. And one of the points that came up on that previous scheme was there was no bungalows. And it was felt that if we provided bungalows, that would be acceptable. Now, in terms of the quantum of the development, one of the aspects of planning that I really dislike, I like creating places. I don't like talking about housing numbers, and we'll get dominated by housing numbers, don't we? You haven't got a 5-year land supply, you have got a 5-year land supply, and all the rest of it. It's about the creation of a sense of place. And I think that scheme with 74 creates a sense of place. I think if you take numbers away, you don't necessarily create a better sense of place, and that's where that's the way that we've approached it. We've thought what would be the best solution for this site, and I appreciate, and I'm very sorry that we haven't got consensus that that's what we've done, but we start with that, what creates a sense of place. The application back in June last year, not 16, it was June 17, wasn't it? It was refused on 3 points. It was refused on tracking, it was refused on affordable housing, and it was refused on education contribution. Now, I took advantage, you would expect me to do, on the advice to appeal. Well, that's not our raison d'etre. It is to try and be consensual. And I'm disappointed that we haven't got the consensual position that we like. But I do think that scheme addresses the issues in the neighbourhood plan, addresses the issues previously raised as reasons for refusal. And I'm very pleased to see that your office has supported it. It hasn't been easy. Your office has done a fantastic job over the years and got that scheme out of those discussions together with the neighbourhood plan.
Many thanks. Anybody else got any questions they'd like to ask? No? Yes, David?
Yeah, just one of our highways officers on that kind of cumulative impact on the highway network that was raised earlier. I don't think we kind of got a full answer to the impact. We're often told on the committee we have to consider things as they are at present, and I respect that, but with the applications that have been made recently that aren't currently yet having an impact on the highway network and those expected in the future, they're all considerations that I believe are actually realities for us to consider. What is a fair impact? What isn't a fair impact? We all know we have terrible highway network problems right throughout Warrington. We need to ease those, and I just want to be assured of what sustainability actually means to the resident on the daily travels and on a daily basis.
Alright, we'll take a question.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, there are certain points in the network South Warrington where there are traffic issues, but the roads in the vicinity of the site itself are generally free-flowing. What I would say is that the movements generated by this proposal were included in the area-wide impact in the transport assessment that completed the development of HCA sites that were considered and approved by this committee in October last year. And it's not considered that the movements generated by the 74 developments here would have a material impact on the highway network.
Anybody else wish to speak? Any comments? Any more questions? If not, are we ready to make a recommendation? Councillors, that's what we're here for. Yes, Judith?
Okay, I would move refusal on the grounds of I believe it's an unsustainable development. Is that a firm enough ground for a refusal?
You hear the question? Yeah. Colin, do you wish to respond to that?
Chair, I think my advice is to the committee. I think we've heard from the applicant this evening that they've done an awful lot. If you think back to where we were last year with this scheme, the scheme wasn't acceptable at that point for a number of technical reasons, albeit in principle the scheme was acceptable, and we advised on that basis. So we refused the scheme for effectively technical reasons. We are here now where the scheme has come an awful long way, and we've done an awful lot of work with the developer. The developer has moved a long way. I'll just draw members' attention to the middle paragraph on page 50, which summarises in the recommendation what the developer is actually offering here. And you've heard that the developer is offering a scheme which isn't just policy compliant, and by that the quantum is shown in monetary terms on page 50 in terms of what council is actually getting there. And the bottom two lines of that talk about sustainable transport contribution of 48,500, plus sheltering works, 10,000, and my colleague here has talked about conditions which relate to additional sustainable development requirements through that approach. In addition to that, the developer has gone some way to providing additional open space over and above the policy requirements. So I don't very often give strong advice to members, but in this instance this evening, my strong advice to members is to go along with the officer's recommendation. The developer has moved a very, very long way from their original submissions. On that basis, Chair, my advice would be not to use the approach of unsustainable development as a reason for refusal. Clearly, that's members' choice if you decide to take that approach. But my advice is that the scheme would almost certainly fail on appeal, but also run the risk of significant costs on that basis.
Council, on the table at the moment is a motion that the application be refused. Can I just perhaps run something past you? Now, I could be wrong with this, but listening to the presentation by the McLuhans, both Mr and Mrs, they seem to me that there's a chink of light there, that there's some movement from the developer. There could be a compromise there, a slight reduction in the houses and a bit more green space. Now, rather than refuse it or whatever, is there a case there to defer it for further talks to see if a compromise could be reached? It's something I'll just run past you. I don't know whether anyone wants to buy into that or not, but it's entirely up to yourselves. You know, it's something prepared to put forward, but I have to say the motion on the table first, which is for refusal, and actually give that some thoughts. So on the table at the moment is refusal. Is anyone prepared to second that? So that falls, so therefore I shall put my proposition. Yes?
Yeah, sorry, I'll withdraw that.
You withdraw it, okay.
At the moment, thank you, Chairman.
Well, you know, I'd like to put forward then that we defer this application, just see if there is an 11th hour agreement that could be reached that was, you know, might reduce it by maybe 3 or 4 more houses and a bit more green space. Whether that would satisfy the people, you know, I don't know. But I think I'm looking to try and find a compromise here. Because I think, in fairness, the developer's got an awful long way, but not quite maybe far enough. So it's just something you might want to go away and consider and bring it back. Yes.
Chair, if we are deferring it, can we have some more robust input from Network Warrington? Because like David,
Yes.
I am very concerned that the bus company runs buses in South Warrington at a loss.
Yeah.
Every time the bus service changes come out, I dread what might happen.
We can request council that they come to the meeting. Yeah.
That this money will be robust enough.
Yeah, okay. We can request that.
Chair, can
Yes.
I just say something? We're talking about buses. Most buses now, right, they put sort of just outside of Warrington. They don't run with the night time. They don't run for the weekend. So basically,
I think that's one of the reasons Council really wants to invite somebody here, because we want some perhaps further assurances than what perhaps we have at the moment. So that's my suggestion, councillors. I would ask you to defer the application to allow further talks to continue and bring it back here in a few weeks' time. Yes, Councillor. Do you want a second?
Thank you. No, Chair. Further to that, I've no problem with referral, but I'm a bit cautious that if something else comes up, we may lose some of these offers on the 106. I would hate to lose any of that because of any
with most
compromise.
applications come with all the chances sometimes we have to take, isn't it? You know.
Okay.
So that's my proposal, Councillor. I'm prepared to second that. Okay, so therefore put that to the vote, that the application be deferred. Further information is required. Hopefully a positive dialogue will take place between the developer and representatives of the village of Appleton and the parish council. And we can get, as suggested by you, get someone here from the bus club to perhaps give us more in-depth information. Okay, so I should put that to the vote. Those in favour of deferring the application, will you please show? Anyone against? Abstentions? The application is deferred. Thank you.